Hey guys, it's Candace Owens, and I'm here to say Christ is King. It's a statement that certainly has gotten me into a lot of trouble this year, but I would say that not declaring Christ as King is something that has gotten society into a lot of trouble as of late. I've had so many discussions, and there are many people that feel such an anxiety. They call this taking the black pill, where you feel so much doom and so much gloom, and you realize the state of things and how terrible it is. But I always invite them to take the white pill, and I tell them the reason why I'm so happy is because you recognize, especially when you are a Catholic and you come to the full faith, what it means to put Christ at the center of everything that you do. I'm talking socially, politically, everywhere. Putting Christ at the center of your life is the difference. And that's why the work that we do within the Catholic community is so important.
Something a little different this time to begin our conference with someone, of course, who is known all around the world for her great work and contributions to the cause of the pursuit of truth, I think we could say. On a Friday night is a little unusual, but again, in God's providence, things I think work out for the best. And so I think it's a wonderful way to start off this conference with our next speaker. I wanted to say just a couple things by introduction. I know you're all anxiously waiting for Candace Owens to come up, but by way of introduction, I wanted to make one little point clear. I didn't follow Candace Owens as much as I should have. I'm sorry, Candace, to admit that. I knew who she was. I had seen her on the floor of Congress one time talking about critical race, I think, or something, and doing a fantastic job. So, of course, I was familiar with her, holding her own, just like I say, like a modern-day Joan of Arc, fighting, against the big guys. So I'd known that. But when she first really came to my attention in a big, powerful, amazing way, probably is about the same time that she first came to your attention in a big, powerful, amazing way, when one day I see on Twitter that trending on Twitter are three words: Christ is King. I immediately got very excited. I'll explain why in a moment, why I found that to be so exciting, because once again, I didn't find it a surprise. As a Catholic, cradle Catholic, traditional Catholic all my life, I've been waiting for the Candace Owens of this world to come along for an awful long time. And I'm not going to go into that. Yes, of course, absolutely. But so it wasn't a surprise or a shock. It was just a joy, a sheer joy. And so I contacted a good friend of mine, and we worked out an invitation to see if Candace Owens and her husband George Farmer could join us. In God's providence, it very quickly turned into a thing. Very quickly it became obvious that this was going to happen. And we were very, 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 very excited for reasons which I'll get into briefly in just a moment. But the interesting thing was, there were a number of people who said, "What's wrong with this idiot Michael Matt? Now they've got this Catholic identity conference thing going, and they're inviting non-Catholics. This is insane." And then that was the first little wave of unpleasantry. It was just a short-lived little wave. And then shortly after that, even some of the traditional Catholics started getting at me, because after that, very quickly thereafter, after Candace Owens had said these horrible words, she lost her job, and then she announces that she had converted to the Catholic faith. To which I, of course, said, "Welcome to the Titanic, Candace." But my point is, I was taken to task by, again, just a little squeaky wheel minority. How dare you invite Candace Owens to the Catholic Identity Conference when she's so new, she's still wet behind the ears, she's not Catholic enough to do this. And I said, "Oh, I'm very sorry, but I invited her before she was a Catholic." And I will explain briefly why that is, and then I'll sit down and let our honored guests address you tonight and speak for you for some time. But the reason I was so eager to get her, friends, it's because all my life I've been struggling as a traditional Catholic, as a little child growing up at the feet of my father, Walter Matt, the feet of Michael Davies, men like that. The message that they tried to convey so often to the world was that what we as traditional Catholics are nothing more then sons who've received the old faith from their fathers and mothers and are handing it down to their sons and daughters. That's all they were. That's all they are. They've invented nothing new. They're not inventing anything. They're not relying solely on their own capacity or their own egos or their own pride to fight the fight that they fight. Their confidence comes from the fact that they stand on the shoulders of saints and scholars and popes and virgins and martyrs who believe the exact same thing that they are defending. That's where it comes from. And so for these great men and for these movements, that's why I say I'm so encouraged, because back then they were so alone. They were so incredibly alone. My father had at the time, he had 7 children, one of whom was yours truly, 8 months old, when he left his job and started the remnant, because he saw the whole thing unfolding. He saw the warnings coming to fruition that St. Pius X and Pius XI and Pius XII and Leo XIII had warned were coming to the church. And so he felt he had to do what he did, and he did, but it was a very lonely position. And so we had traditionalists were sort of misunderstood, that you guys are so arrogant. You think you're more Catholic than the Pope. Well, in those days it was, that was a joke. In those days it was a joke. It's not so funny anymore. But they had to suffer under this, you know. But what they were always saying about the Latin Mass is not that we go to Latin Mass, which puts us into an elitist club, we're better than everybody else. What they were saying is that we're looking at the auto-demolition of the church, as Pope Paul VI called it, the auto-destruction of the church. We're looking at the smoke of Satan entering into the sanctuary. We are going to cling with everything we've got to the faith of our fathers. That's all they were saying. It was for security. It wasn't arrogance. It was humility and obedience. Cling to the old faith. That's the only thing you know. That's the only security you have. And so they did. And so clinging to the Latin Mass, which of course codifies doctrine and dogma and everything that we believe, even liturgically, it can't be messed with by modernists so easily, can it? It's all right there, even in the dead language. And that's why they clung to the Latin Mass, to the liturgy of our fathers. But what's often forgotten, and this is my point before I sit down, what's often forgotten is that for all of these men, Archbishop Lefebvre, Michael Davis, Walter, I can go and list them all, and praise be God, bishops such as Bishop Schneider, who's here with us tonight. For all of these men, it was the social kingship of Jesus Christ that mattered. That's what mattered. The Latin Mass helped them and aided them and kept them in the faith so that they would never become befuddled, so they would never become diabolically disoriented, as Sister Lucia of Fatima said, so that they would always cling to the faith and that they would always recognize, not just recognize Christ as King, but proclaim it. Proclaim it as a reality, not as a pious devotion, not as something that happens after death. The kingship of Christ is in this world, and it is because we have rejected the kingship, rejected his kingship, that we have chaos in our streets, and we're slaughtering our babies, and our children are psychologically, moral, and spiritually castrated now. It was always the kingship of Christ, friends. So that realization now, to get to my introduction, realizing that what they had said, that eventually the Christ or chaos model, eventually, when you don't have Christ the King, there are simply not enough police officers in the world to control or to police the chaos that will follow. You have only chaos. And there will be people from all walks of life who, if they are intelligent, if they are walking through life with their eyes open, if they have a degree of humility, will begin to see, finally, we must turn back to God. Candace Owens has said how many times, this is a holy war. Indeed it is. And the holy warriors fight under a king. We are led into this battle by a king, a real king. Not some pious devotion, but a real king, the Son of God, the second person of the Blessed Trinity, Christ, our royal sovereign king. So when Candace Owens came out in front of the whole world, and I don't want to embarrass her, but this is just the facts. the reason she's here tonight is because Candace Owens had a lot to lose from those three words. In this world, temporally, human respect, she had a lot to lose. She has everything to gain spiritually, but a lot to lose. And that to me is the dead giveaway that somebody is on the right track, that somebody is fighting the right fight. That's a warrior. That's a person who's in the foxholes with us because of how much she had to lose. She's not here tonight, believe you me, because this is a stepping stone to someplace more famous for Candace Owens. With that, ladies and gentlemen, again, I'll close by saying this, just that. They were always, the old pioneers were always saying, hold on, hang on, keep the faith. God will show you the way. So originally there were just a couple of people standing at the foot of the cross, but there were a couple, and those couple changed history forever. And they were afraid too, no doubt. But they kept the faith standing at the foot of the cross, and that ultimately more and more people are going to realize now there's no way to vote our way out of this. There's no way out of this other than to find our way through the darkness to the foot of the cross, looking at a man, apparently, who is dying, giving up his last breath, and remaining convinced that this is Christ the King, Lord of history, keeping the faith until the third day. Until Easter Sunday. Now there are many people. I am so glad and happy. I am not an unhappy man tonight because of our next speaker. I am so happy to say there are so many people now who are finding their way through the darkness to the foot of the cross. Candace Owens represents for us a new chapter in the Catholic counter-revolution. People in the mainstream who have tremendous influence, who are all of a sudden saying, it's either hell or it's heaven, it's Christ or chaos. Well, guess what? I choose Christ the King. Ladies and gentlemen, Candace Owens.
Everybody hear me? Great. Thank you guys. Have a seat. Let's get started. I'm so honored to be here, and thank you so much for the invitation. And you are correct. It did come earlier than people thought that it did. So much to talk about, and I'm always like, what do people want to hear? And I guess the first thing I'll say is my life would be so much easier if I could just be quiet, you know? I think about that all the time, just how easy it could be if I could just be quiet. And I just was never wired that way. And so many people ask, you know, where do you get this confidence to speak out and to say certain things? And really it comes down to just me.